Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have you here today. My name is Tim Harrison, and I serve as the Associate Director at the Emory Compassion Center. The long name is the Emory Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. And I'm the Associate Director for the CBCT program, this compassion training program called Cognitively Based Compassion Training. And it's my honor to introduce our speaker, our keynote speaker this year at the Juliet E. Shield Symposium in Compassion. We want to pause and really thank Ms. Shield and the Robbins Foundation for supporting the symposium each year. This is our second of 5 years. And each year we get to share a public keynote talk. That's what you're here for today. So Rhonda, it's great to have you here. The talk that Rhonda will offer, she is calling Healing the Separations, the Critical Need for Socially Engaged Compassion and the Science of Cultivating It. And I'm really excited to and eager to hear the talk. Let me just say a few words about Rhonda to set the stage. She comes to us from the world of contemporary meditation and compassion practice, but also from the field of law and legal education. She's studied, practiced, and taught law for more than 30 years, and more than half that time has been a full professor at the University of San Francisco School of Law. So she has so much experience in that world. And I would offer that it's probably pretty unusual for someone from that world to also have this expertise in contemplative practice. But I suspect she'll tell us more about that. Looking at her extensive CV, you see that in fact she's been kind of shaking things up for many years. I found articles on critical race theory that are 30 years old, long before most of us had even heard the phrase. And also talks that from 20 years ago called things like, what does it really mean to think like a lawyer and what's love got to do with it? Or this one at Harvard in 2006, subtitled Humanity, Consciousness, and Legal Education. It felt really resonant to me as we gather to consider what compassion has to do with the law or whatever other direction Rhonda will take us, in particular, social justice. She's a longtime contemplative practitioner, inspired by observing her grandmother's morning tradition in the Christian tradition of meditation as she was growing up in a very small town in the rural South. And she so clearly twisted these many strands of her life into a very strong braid and has emerged as an important thought leader in not only in the legal world, but more broadly in this urgent intersection between the field of contemplative science and contemplative practice and social justice. Her book of 2019 called The Inner Work of Racial Justice, highly recommend this book. You can, I was asking Rhonda beforehand, at the Random House as the publisher, you can go to the website and we'll publish her, we'll put her website link here at the end of the talk. Highly recommend the book. It's really cutting edge, but also just a unique voice that has been personally very meaningful for me and also meaningful for so many people I know. I'll pause just on a personal note and say that my own education as a white person growing up in the South and learning about the role of race in my life, which has really been a journey that's only started in the last 10 years or so. I really credit Rhonda and my work with her and reading from her and hearing her speak at the Mind and Life conferences, and especially a incredible workshop I was lucky enough to attend that she led called Mindfulness and Racial Justice, where I was able to travel with about 15 others from Atlanta, most from the Atlanta Public Schools, a group of teachers, who are part of a program that uses this compassion training here at Emory as part of their teacher training. It was just such a meaningful experience, and has helped me to live into and make sense of some contradictions about my life, working to in this compassion field to help people transform their biases, transform their mindsets, while at the same time acknowledging that my own biases and mindsets need the same transformation. So how do I sit in that place? How do I sit in the place of being a leader in at Emory University, and the best leader I can be in a world that would benefit from having fewer, or let's say proportionally fewer leaders who look like me or come from my particular cultural background. So these contradictions are tough, and all I can say is that I've benefited, Rhonda, from your presence and insight. So thank you. And I really, so again, I just say that to express how much of an honor it is for me to be able to introduce you today. I will end there and pass it on to you.
Wow, thank you. Whew. Thank you very, very much, my dear Dr. Harrison, my friend Tim. I want to just say what an honor and a pleasure it is for me to be joining with you. I do remember uh, some of our early moments together many years ago now, and the spirit of resonance and kind of mutuality, of passion, of interest, of concern, of pain, looking at the state of things and commitment to courageously doing what we can in the time that we have. And I recall your mentioning that one day perhaps we might join together at Emory, or we might work together somehow. So here we are with the magic of technology joining together. And I'm very, very grateful to the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics, where you sit and at the helm, and to the sponsors of this symposium, the Juliet E Symposium on Compassion, including the foundational support behind it. So thank you, thank you. And most importantly now, I want to just really appreciate everybody who is here. Everyone who has gathered. I like to use a metaphor. I like to use metaphors that remind us of our connection to the earth. So if it feels good where you are, to imagine an oasis or a lake that we're gathering around on this in this moment, or if a fire image resonates with you, imagine again from the far-flung places where we each sit in our individuality right now, the fullness of our incredible known and unknowable lineage right here, right now in our bodies and beings. So just pausing to honor all that each one of you who is gathered here, all that you are, as we turn together toward the theme of my reflections, healing the separations. Healing the separations, a critical need for socially engaged compassion and the science of cultivating it. As you all have heard, and many of you have had at least perhaps some experience of this with me, I do draw on contemplative practices and approaches for everything that I do as best I can, including presentations like this. So I just want to say that I'm speaking to you from a place of much preparation and also from a willingness to kind of let this go and let the spirit underneath the preparations, the deep sort of embodied experience and feeling beneath the preparations, the sorrow I feel when I pause and look out upon the world and feel the kind of implications, ramifications of all of the suffering in our midst. When we are coming together like this, I am aware that we're coming together from all the different places, many different places, right? And our experiences are 100% unique, of course, always. And yet we're going to be looking at some of the patterns that have yielded, the sort of suffering that training in compassion-based applied ethics, all of the ways that those trainings and that suffering is meant to help support us. And I just want to pause. I realize there's a little bit of an effort to kind of work with the technology and make sure we're all able to see and be in connection here. So why don't I pause and invite a little bit of meditation as we ground ourselves in this moment. I really want to invite everyone who is here, again, as you're feeling the connection between your body and the earth in this moment, feeling the ground beneath the chair or the cushion or the floor on which you stand or sit, literally feeling the points of contact between the body and these supports in this moment. Breathing in and breathing out. And as you breathe in and out, feeling the earth beneath you and sensing into the awareness that in this moment it's stable and safe enough for you to be here. And so if any appreciation arises, see if you can notice where that's coming up in your body. As you breathe in and out, maybe just relaxing, resting just a little bit more in the sense of being held in this moment by this planet, which in this moment and in every moment that we live, we all share. Inviting for the next few moments a calming of perhaps the energy that it took to get you here. You are here, allowing the sense of having arrived, feeling the way in which our being here is a manifestation of the way in which life has selected for us, each and every one of us, if you will. And in that sense, we inherently belong right here, right now, living and breathing together. So allowing, perhaps resting on the sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath, wherever you happen to find yourself in this moment. And continuing to follow along in silence for the next few moments, just coming home to the body. As best you can, bringing love to any parts of this moment that are difficult for you. I already have one hand over my heart. Research has shown some of the ways that our own touch can be a support for helping us calm the body, the mind, come back home to the sense of our safety here. So if, as you come into this moment of reflection, difficult emotions are coming up, memories, anxiety, see if you can just pause and invite loving compassion right in to your own experience in this moment. The wish that you be free of your own suffering, discomfort, and the roots and causes of those right here, right now. Breathing in and breathing out, and if you can feel any way in which pausing is offering you support, see if you can explore what this is like for you. Is it warmth? Is it ease? As you breathe out, are you feeling yourself able to relax and soften just a little bit more? Perhaps a gentle scan from head to toe to see where you might be holding any tightness and inviting the loving support right in. And from this place of allowing ourselves to pause, to bring kindness right into our own experience, the invitation is to extend this ease, whatever, to whatever degree you're feeling it. Imagine extending it throughout the entire body, from head to toe, opening up to allowing yourself to feel a sense of support in this moment, and to extend that sense of support in a way that at this time, imagine a person sitting to our left, to our right, across from us, behind us, in a large circle around the globe, around the country, in our community, wherever we happen to be. And imagine extending the wish for well-being and compassion, the wish that we alleviate and the suffering that we feel, that we be supported in feeling free of that suffering, that pain, that discomfort, that injustice, and the causes of them, right down to the root. Imagine extending this call for alleviation of suffering and the energy of that from this moment, from your heart out into the world. Call forth those communities you know to be suffering right now, individuals you know to be suffering right now, people in whose name you gather, communities on whose behalf you labor, who inspire you. May we be filled with compassion and loving kindness. May we each and all beings, be filled with compassion and loving kindness. May we be well in body and mind. May we be safe from inner and outer dangers. May we be truly joyful, easeful, and free. So breathing in and breathing out. And I just want to let my tech support team here know that I am also, thank you so much for the gratitude for that practice. I just want to let folks know I am also unable to open up the visual feed. I still see Tim fixed as speaker view. I'm not sure I can disable that on my end. But I am very, very grateful. Thank you all for your presence, for your practice. Thank you, tech support team and everyone here. Thank you for the way that the co-practice together is supporting us in turning toward this challenging topic. Yeah, thank you all. Sending the wish that we continue the thread, right? I want to invite us pausing and sensing into any way in which, yes, thank you, tech support team, for supporting us in all of this visual, the sort of feast of visual kind of feed and questions. Thank you all. Here we are. So yeah, I want to just really invite us to sense into a thread that we might draw from what has arisen for us in this practice. Is it a greater sense of calm, connectedness? Is it a reminder of our inner resources? Yeah. Is it an appreciation for the lineages, the communities in whose name we come together, whose struggles we uplift, the ancestors who dreamed that we might find ways to thrive and to heal? So I want to call forth whatever is arising in you in the way of inspiration and motivation for coming together around this theme of healing the separations. As we do that, we think of some of the ways that we are inspired to come together. I want to have us sort of think concretely. What do you know about the separations that this title might be calling us to look at? What do those separations look like from where you are? And what are some of the wounds, the evidence of woundedness that suggests there might be something to heal that appear from where you are? Again, contemplative approaches to teaching and learning center on awareness that while we might need ways to check out what we believe we know, we want to hold it in the light of verification with objective sources, but we honor subjective ways of knowing as part of the contemplative teaching and learning project. First person ways of knowing, what we know in our own body, in our own bones about the topics that we come together to address. So what do you know in your bodies, in your bones? What do you know about the way that, let's say, social identity-based separations, culturally, politically motivated separations, what are these separations that we are talking about here that we might heal through our compassion-based, mindfulness-based practices and the ethical commitments that arise from them? So for me, in this moment, I'm thinking about a lot of different ways that I see the separations. I think of the painfulness of the political threats that are appearing across our country right now. I'm a lawyer. So just as one concrete example, people who are serving as judges around the country right now, people who are serving in any kind of public leadership capacity, whether it be members of the school boards, public health officials seeking to bear up in the midst of these interlocking pandemics, of course, the ongoing public health crisis that's impacting all our communities, coronavirus, which has revealed, many of the ways that the legacies of these separations that have shown up in what might be called segregation, the legacies of, underlying segregation, um, so many different policies and practices that are at the heart and the foundation of our unique community, political economy and community in the United States, what we call the United States of America. We know that as we gather together here in this land that we are privileged to be a part of, frankly. We are a part of this land, actually. We know that though we have inherited a long and deep history of painful separations between, ways of justifying taking and clearing the land and making it available by force and other means, right? Through the process of colonialism, colonization, and then the kinds of internal colonialisms that led to enslavement and segregation and the painful long history of separation and othering around immigration. Who could become a citizen, who could be eligible to vote, who could own property and therefore feel a sense of thriving within the context of the rules of this particular political economy. In other words, we have inherited kind of a political culture that embeds challenges around the sense that we all belong. But even underneath that, we've inherited a kind of a legacy since, well, throughout much of what we call Western, civilization, if you will, what has been called civilization. We have inherited long and deep traditions of separation from not just one another for a variety of reasons, but from ourselves and the planet. We've inherited traditions of separations of different modes of knowing and being. So separating, supposedly rational mind from emotional mind or being, right? Mind from heart. Yeah. Separation, segregation, I see a comment, does not allow for awareness, for knowing of each other, or for open-heartedness and trust. And these we're hearing in this comment. Thank you, Rebecca. This is a comment that helps us think about what it is we need to heal from. What are the legacies of these sorts of separations? If we're feeling a constant sense of vulnerability, if we're feeling, again, the sense of defendedness against being wounded, not respected, if we're feeling, again, some of the pain of being met with disrespect, being met with the sense that somehow our lives are not valued. If we have felt, again, some of the consequences of the sense that we, are alienated inevitably from the sources of our well-being in the planet, in the environment, by the systems that we live in, that have often trained us to think of the environment as disposable, to think of certain populations within our communities and around the globe as disposable. So there's a lot, when I think of this topic, obviously you hear, I think of so many of the ways that we have been trained to feel ourselves separate and apart from many sources of well-being. First and foremost, perhaps being the planet. I start this broadly, partly in recognition of one of the teachings I received from a great teacher, a shamanistic teacher that I was fortunate to meet in South Africa a few years ago. There was a beautiful conference put on in South Africa on mindfulness in the South African context. And at that conference, those of us who were fortunate to be there had an opportunity to sit with and listen to a teacher, Baba Mandaza Kademwa. You can look up this wonderful, beautiful master teacher and find out more about Baba Kademwa if you are interested. But one of the deep teachings that he offered to us was that first and foremost, if we're going to think about mindfulness for justice, compassionate ethics, doing what we might do to bring about more equitable ways of being together on the planet where actually everything is connected, we have to really attend to the ways in which the various separations that we have inherited, that we are enacting, that we feel in some sense often unconsciously or unintentionally committed to. We've got to know them, see them, and begin to heal these separations, all of them. He invited this metaphor of the ocean perhaps as a metaphor for who we are, who we might be, who we are as human communities together, and invited us to imagine being like the ocean that refuses no river. What would it be like for us to create a sense of awareness of who we are, first and foremost, because we always start where we are, don't we? A sense of awareness, a way of inviting what we might call contemplative practices, compassion-based practices, mindfulness-based practices, these awareness practices, to support us not just in focusing the mind, calming, concentrating, dealing with our anxieties, and all of these beautiful, performing more effectively, all of these beautiful outcomes that the science of mindfulness and compassion have helped us see and highlight. Those are important. We'll keep doing that research. But I want us to kind of open up the aperture on our aspirations for this work. Yes, we want to heal our individual wounds. Yes, we want to help ourselves to be more able to work together across our lines of real and perceived differences. Yes, we want to be able to, again, heal the ways that we individually are suffering right now in this time of interlocking pandemics, and our communities are suffering. And the ways we've been disappointed by people who we had hoped might help, whether they be politicians, whether they be other lawyers, like people like me. I see someone noting, I've realized the deep bias I have against lawyers. Yeah. I will say that I come to you with humility from my lawyer tribe, because when I think about the causes of the separations that I'm talking about, I'm aware that this particular profession, law, as well as the profession of academia, frankly, let's say it, we all, from wherever we are, know something about how these separations are created, maintained, and reinforced. Law certainly has played, at best we might say, a double-faced role, maybe more of a wounding. Yeah, I see that folks are asking what are some of the comments they see that I'm responding to, and I just realized some of the comments that are coming up in chat are not going to everyone. They're coming just to hosts and panelists. So, for example, there's been a comment that I noticed that says, "I honestly just realized what a deep bias I have against lawyers. I'm scared of lawyers as a group because of bad experiences with individuals and the media," which is wrong. This commenter is saying, and I really appreciate and with humility will report this share, "You are so warm-hearted and it fills me with hope over your years of experience. Have you noticed a shift towards an environment and culture in lawyers which allows lawyers to be more warm-hearted?" You know, have I noticed such a shift? Some of us are part of this effort to shift the community of lawyers. In fact, I have an article that I wrote. uh, Dr. Harrison was so beautiful in pointing out these articles I've written over the many years. This one came out in 2013 called Contemplative Practices and the Renewal of Legal Education, right? So this idea of, I published in this sort of effort to kind of speak to how contemplative sciences was changing and seeking to transform all of higher education, including law. And so I was chronicling in that essay how we were looking deeply at the role of law and lawyering in the contemporary era and historically in not necessarily healing separations, but reinforcing them, right? And so, yes, as I'm inviting each of us to do, have turned toward my own discipline. We all are invited, I believe, in this moment to start where we are with healing these separations. So that means look at our personal experience, right? The wounds we carry and the need we have for healing that run through our own very personal history and experience on the planet, in these bodies that we have, these bodies that are signaling different things when we go out into the world. And so we're met with assumptions. We're met with threats based on what we look like, based on the thoughts people have about people like us, whether they be motivated by race and racism, political polarization, and the current effort to, magnify any political difference into a justification for violence is very, very real. So those threats are real. In other words, we as soft-bellied, carbon-based beings are feeling our many vulnerabilities right now. So part of this invitation is to pause and reflect, how am I in need of healing? And from that place, though, as we start to look at the work that we do and the location, the positions we occupy in these many communities and networks and institutional locations where we sit, we are invited then perhaps to look at how we might begin some of the healing right where we are. And for me, that has included looking at legal education and law for many years. As I say, this essay on the renewal of legal education came out in 2013, but many of my essays and the writing that I've done over the years, including the very first published law review article that I wrote came out in 1992 or 3, was looking at, it was called The Master's Tools from the Bottom Up, looking at law as an example of the tools of dominator culture. When I said master's tools, I was referring kind of in a metaphoric and literary way in reference to the old homily that many of you may have heard before: the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. And inviting this question, what are the master's tools? How are they showing up in law? How are they showing up in education, including higher education, including contemplative and compassion-based science and education? how might we bring awareness to how the legacies of white supremacist and other forms of dominator culture have shown up in our disciplines? I've been thinking about that question for many years. And so that very first piece, the master's tools from the bottom up, was an invitation to look at um, how the legacies of racism and white supremacy embedded in law and politics from the founding of our country were still showing up in the legal education that I was privileged to receive at the University of Virginia in the period 1990 to 1993, where we were learning a lot about history, but nothing general, lots of histories, lots of different types of history, how we got the Constitution in a certain sense, and very many different types of it, how we came to understand personal injury law and tort law and the early cases going back to, the continents of Europe and on and on and on. But no systematic, none, no systematic history or introduction to the history of enslavement, the history of the genocidal colonizing of the land that we sat on. No systematic introduction to the relevance of those values of domination, dispossession, how they were running through law itself, impacting all of us in ways that were largely invisible, but also part of the acculturation and socializing that we were getting as we were being brought into the tribe of lawyers. And so there were many different reasons why I was drawn to this deep inquiry around how to begin repairing, right? In fact, this article, The Master Tools from the Bottom Up, was not only looking at, white supremacy and its legacies in law, but literally looking at the responses to reparations theory that were coming up again as they come up in waves, these calls for reparations for African Americans, for indigenous peoples, for those who have been wounded by these legacies of hierarchy and division that run through our cultures. That article was seeking to look at how the law did or did not treat these calls for reparations way back in 1993. But it was really an opportunity for me to sort of meditate on what the legal education process might better do to help us heal, to repair those wounds from our past in the society at large, to repair those wounds that in the ways that they still were showing up, right, in demographic disparities leading to who could become a lawyer, who could become a law professor that we're still living with. So the inequalities and the consequences are all around us, and the effort, right, to address them is painful and regnant, right, prevalent. We're still working on this. I see a comment, and no history of police and law enforcement either, which is right, rooted in slavery. So someone saying, yeah, we go to law school, we don't have a history given to us around the rootedness of law enforcement in, again, upholding these notions of property that were extended, not just to justify the taking of land from indigenous people here, but to justify this idea of that people who look like me could be held as property. So, and then of course, yes, wealth, capitalism, and all of the different ways that these hierarchies of value that were attached to differently racialized bodies coexisted with these notions of capital accumulation to form a kind of racial capitalism that we're also still living with. How do we heal all of the different aspects of those legacies that are in, say, the discipline of law, but not only law? Because again, law was able to interact and interconnect with all the other disciplines. that were arrayed in different ways around supporting and justifying and maintaining a status quo in which or through which these hierarchies of value could be maintained and the maldistribution of the resources to thriving, right? The resources that were becoming available as a result of these policies and practices of accumulation that were created through our economic and political systems here in the United States and abroad. But those policies and practices of economic accumulation then gave rise to these power battles around who controls those, right? And what are the justifications for who gets to be wealthy and who gets to be well and whole and appreciated and respected under these systems. We're still living with the consequences of this. So I want to just sort of name that when I come to you, I'm speaking to each of you from where you are with this call, that this time that we have together on the planet right now, in the midst of these interlocking pandemics, is not for nothing. I believe it's meant to really wake us up to the need to heal these separations, to engage together in the practices that support our figuring out ways to more systematically address our suffering individually, interpersonally, and in the various collectivities where we find ourselves. How do we do that? Well, the science of compassion, this community that we are part of, has given us some reason for hope that that I want to say we want to recognize and amplify. In other words, while we are working to heal and repair within these disciplines, including it within the science of compassion, we're going to keep looking at the ways that perhaps dominator culture is shaping how we do the science in some hidden way, unintentional way, shaping who gets to do the science in hidden and unintentional ways, what we recognize as merit in all of this. All of this needs to be brought into conscious and constant engagement if we're really going to keep, making science itself be a vehicle for the healing, making academia itself be vehicles, a place where the healing can occur. So we've got work to do, but I just want to say that part of what I think we can do is to amplify the fact that, the science of compassion has given us research that supports us in knowing we can heal. We can rely on practices of compassion, of mindfulness to support us in healing. I'm going to just name some of the research that has inspired me to know that when I invite students and colleagues and social justice advocates and leaders, politicians, I've spoken before Parliament in the UK, just to name some of the ways that these aspirations, science, this effort that I've been making to to apply the science of mindfulness and compassion and to invite all of us into this international global conversation about how we heal, right? I've been invited into, all kinds of conversations around the world at every different level, because we need this conversation and these practices actually to reach as many people as possible. I'm confident that inviting people to practice compassion and meditation is of a benefit on this journey, in part because of some of the great research that has been presented, developed over the course of the last few decades. I'm thinking of my friend Dr. Helen Wang, who, with a group of researchers from the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin, led by the great Richie Davidson, Helen in 2008, with her team, published a study which underscored how compassion meditation may help us overcome habits of being distressed when we turn toward the suffering in the world. Because what I'm talking about here is not just, things that we might need to learn cognitively, but I'm also inviting us to notice what happens in our body when we think about the legacies of segregation, slavery, genocide, the intersection of all of that with hierarchies around gender and obviously class and age and immigration status, and on and on and on. What happens to us when we're invited to really look at all of those things? Where do we feel the challenge in our own bodies, even right here in this conversation? Meditation practices, compassion practices, like the ones we started our conversation with, have been shown to help with the predictable distress that can arise when we actually turn toward these challenges. And we know that, especially right now, when everybody's been suffering in some way, in ways seen and not seen, it's especially hard for us to keep our hearts open, to keep looking at, all right, how are other people doing right now who are not faring perhaps as well as I am in this moment? It is much, much harder to do. It is much easier said than done to bring compassion to the world, to actually keep seeking to alleviate the suffering of those who are most vulnerable in our midst. It involves meeting conflict, standing up to people who are empowered, who don't want necessarily to hear your perspective on how we might address the needs of the most vulnerable, right? It means sometimes being ostracized, right? We have all been trained to help maintain the status quo. And so when we stand up to say, oh, I see suffering in this community and I'd love to have us address it in systematic ways, even if it means simply maybe wearing a mask, asking people to get a vaccine, or whatever way in which we might be motivated based on our sense of the science and of our kind of a, well-founded read as a, of the objective information that is available to us that we integrate with our subjective knowing, right? And our interpersonal ways of knowing. We integrate all of these ways of knowing to give ourselves the best support for healing that we can. And when we do that, we're going to be met with people who will resist it. And frankly, research is even showing that even the call to compassion can be resisted even within ourselves. Some part of us, especially in times like this when we all know too much about what vulnerability feels like, any one of us can feel resistant to the call for compassion. So yes, research is showing us more and more about how compassion works, about how it can support us in doing this difficult work of staying in the struggle together and building out our capacity for power with each other as opposed to power over, which I think is really maybe the most fundamental call right now, right here, for us to really be looking at when we think about the efficacy, the application of compassion science today. We know we're in another period, and our history is replete with periods like this, in which the practices and ideologies of dominator modes of being that really we see all around the world in different manifestations, different cultures. We have a particular set of dominator histories in the United States that are tied to these legacies of white supremacy. These things are on the rise right now again. And we'd be remiss if we didn't name that all of our institutions, our ways of knowing, the science that we develop, it's all operating within the context of a world that's being invited into reinforcing notions of hierarchy, separation, othering, right, as opposed to belonging, building walls, arming ourselves, and resolving our conflicts with violence. We know that the calls for that are really pitched right now. So when I think about how we might be inspired, both to recognize that we've learned that compassion practices actually do help us soften our own hearts, deal with the pain that we feel in this time of so much, difficulty. Help us heal our communities. These practices actually do help us, and they're not a panacea because the difficulty that we're facing is very real. So I guess I want to begin bringing these remarks to a close by inviting us to really feel the courage that as these magnificent yet ordinary, right, soft-bellied human beings, each of that we are. Like we were not born actually, I don't think, to suffer. Even those of us who have suffered a lot, and those of us whose heritages and lineages teach us a lot about suffering, whether we are, people of color, African American, indigenous people, Latinx folks, Asian American heritage, Asian heritage people, and white racialized people who we know from our heritages. And if we look at our history, we all know something about the way that dominator cultures have wounded us all. But we are not born to suffering. We were not born only to suffer. And so these practices, as our teacher Alice Walker taught so many of us, right? We were born to both recognize the suffering, heal from it, and not miss the color purple, not miss the beauty of being alive together. But it does take courage, and it takes us building out the supportive power of our working together across these lines of real and perceived difference. We need to amplify the science that gives us courage and helps us believe in the possible of our working more effectively together. We need our science to be directed at more of these interpersonal dynamics and the challenges of working together across lines of real and perceived difference. And we need to really bring even more courageous effort to all of this, both our personal commitments, the efforts we're making to change science, our disciplines, our communities, the work that we do today. Bring more courage, bring more commitment. Why? Because at the end of the day, we know we have this moment. None of us has promised the next 30 years to figure this out, the next 15 years to figure this out, the next 15 days to figure this out. We know we have now. So can we, from this place of recognizing the urgency of these calls, but also, feeling resourced by knowing that we have within us the capability to heal, to repair, to transform ourselves in the world? Can we feel the joyful resonance of the power of loving compassion to help us? And can we move into what we can do from where we are today to raise up, to amplify our commitment to making the most of the moments of our lives, to actually giving better than we have received, and being in this place, occupying the place of stewardship that I think we're all, as human beings, capable of making manifest wherever we are. We all have some power. We may not all be at the top of any pyramid. Do we need to be? When we have the magnificent power that comes from our full-bodied presence in the world and our loving hearts. So I close with that invitation. Pause. Take a moment to recognize the power of your being, to sense into the ocean that you are and the many different rivers that comprise the ocean that you are. See if you can invite the energy to heal the separations within yourself, within your own communities, so that we can be in our roles as teachers, educators, advocates, leaders, healers in some way, scholars, researchers. We might be a part of that ocean that refuses no river, that itself is the beautiful, loving manifestation of the power of presence and compassionate ways of being to help heal the deepest wounds of our time. I thank you very, very much for taking the time to be with me today, and I look forward to continuing on this journey with each of you as best I can, whether in person, whether in ways seen and unseen. We are always interconnected in this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so much. Wow. So encouraging, inspiring for me. And if the kind of tapestry of notes in the chat and question are any indication, then it was the same for others. I was particularly touched by this comment from a friend of mine who's a physician in Chicago. This is such a profound talk. I hope thousands, if not more, are attending from across professions and perspectives. So let us hope that's true, and want everyone to know that this talk was being recorded, and we'll make it available at our website in a couple of days, compassion.emory.edu. So it will be something you can watch again and be inspired again or share with others. We'll also put, and maybe we'll email this out to everyone with our thank you email for attending, but a link to Rhonda's website where you can learn more about her book and all the many ways to get it, from ebook to hardback to softback to audio. Um, Please, it's really wonderful, inspiring book, worth reading more than once, I would say. So, and then finally, out of respect for the topic, I want to correct a little thing that I'm not a doctor. So I
Neither am
deeply,
I. You're
uh,
an honorary doctor. We're
I
honorary doctors.
deeply appreciate the impulse to respect, to share respect and admiration, but not a doctor. So, though we have many here, and I think that's it. My fellow facilitators in the background, have I covered everything? Are we saying goodbye?
Thank you, everyone, for all of your beautiful reflections and responses. And my
Thank
dear,
you, Rhonda.
thank you so much.
Maybe we have time, we can save the chat so you can read all of these amazing comments.
Yes, I am doing that, and just so grateful that this recording will be available. Yes, Tim,
Yes,
to share
yes.
through the website, through the center's website.
Yeah, we have to process it, we put it on YouTube and then link it to the, I think it's going to be on the homepage. So
Okay, great.
you can share that with anyone once that's set up. It's probably take a couple of, might be Monday before that's ready.
Good. Good.
Thank you so much. I'll
See
see
you
you
again very
soon.
soon. Yes.